I'm Ed Adams, and this is the weekly Genealogy Toolkit, the podcast that helps new genealogists get the most out of their research time and avoid the most common pitfalls. About this time, 2 years ago, it almost felt like we had arrived at the singularity. AI was on the tip of everyone's tongue within the tech community, and it wasn't long after that before everyone was talking about it. Large language models enabled us to interact with complex algorithms clad in machine learning, and for the first time, it felt like maybe the internet was going to get good again. I had flashbacks to those early days of the internet before advertisements and international power politics ruined everything. But that was just the digital beer goggles that accompanies any major leap in technology. Now that we've gotten past that initial bow wave of newness, the goggles are gone, and the internet actually feels much worse. The amount of garbage AI content being thrown at us nonstop is making the internet of 2 years ago feel like a cyber Mayberry. Legions of grind bros with room temperature IQs are pumping one bad idea after another through a series of AI tools and calling it content, and watching any of it makes me feel dumber. Future AI developers now have a major challenge ahead of them. How do you train new models on massive datasets, with much of those datasets consisting of AI-generated garbage? It's a feedback loop that I hadn't anticipated, and I suspect the developers hadn't either. So, yeah, I'm a bit disappointed with where AI has brought us over the last couple of years, but that doesn't mean that there's no use for it in our genealogical workflow. But let's start by talking about what AI even is. It's become a marketing buzzword that appears just about everywhere, even in places that seem odd. Like, does my dish soap really need new advanced AI? Now, I'm not a data scientist, so if you are, maybe you're going to cringe at some of my definitions and where I draw some lines, but I think I'm going to land pretty close. AI, or artificial intelligence, is a complex collection of algorithms informed by massive datasets enabled by machine learning to ultimately mimic human reasoning and decision-making. So it has the ability to fiddle with its own algorithms in such a way that the same question can be posed to it multiple times, and you're likely to get variations on how it responds. Over time, as it's trained on additional datasets, it might change its response to the previous questions significantly. All of this is done by the AI itself, more or less without human intervention, beyond providing additional datasets, of course. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I'll link to a MITRE Corporation study that goes into depth in what AI is capable of today and what areas it's still immature in. But suffice it to say that, much like the grind bros that love it so much, AI is that obnoxious teenager that thinks he knows everything because he read a blog and watched a YouTube video. But once you scratch the surface, you realize the emperor is wearing no clothes. We have had things within the genealogy world that have been AI, or at least very AI-adjacent technologies for a long time. I remember being amazed in the early years by how Ancestry.com could take my absolute garbage search queries and still give me the records that I wanted. It would give me those shaky leaf tips, and I'd look at their recommendations thinking, how in the world did you come up with this? It's clearly wrong, only to find several weeks later that it was in fact correct. Like the AI of today, though, those sorts of systems could also let us down in so many ways. They can kind of be like when your kid is trying to help you work on your car. Like, you're under there, covered in grime, wrenching away on something. Your kid comes in with the flashlight and can crawl under there with you and generally point that flashlight in a helpful direction, but they still have no idea what you're doing. There are some ways that it's being used in genealogy today that is yielding some amazing results. The first thing that comes to mind is the full search experiment over at Family Search Labs. If you opt into the experiment, it gives you the ability to search non-indexed, previously image-only collections. Not all of them yet, but the 2 major U.S. collections available now are U.S. land and probate records, 1630 to 1975, and U.S. plantation records, 1700s to 1865. They also have a Mexican, Australian, and New Zealand collection as well. My assumption is that as they refine this technology, it will eventually be unleashed on their entire image-only collection. Previously with these collections, you had to work like a genealogist of old, looking up indexes and finding which book and page number your target record could be found in. Then you'd have to track down the book and flip to the page and painstakingly transcribe what sometimes can be really challenging handwriting. The quality of the AI transcription is still so-so, but it's certainly good enough to get you to what you're looking for much more quickly. So maybe don't take the transcription at its word just yet. But this will introduce a lot of beginner genealogists to some amazing resources that they were previously too intimidated to approach. Ancestry has been playing around with an AI text generator that parses census data, among others, and can give you a plain text summary of everything in there. It's pretty good, but censuses are so easy to parse that I don't really see myself using it. But I don't really want to spend all my time here talking about what various companies are doing to incorporate AI into their offerings. To me, that's basically just marketing for the most part. Let's instead talk about what you can do with AI tools that aren't specifically designed for genealogy to assist you with your research. Primarily, I'm going to be talking about leveraging the popular large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Bloom, Llama, and others. Some people have hopped on their favorite LLM interface and done something along the lines of, who were the parents of Samuel Fredericks of Wilkes County, North Carolina, born in 1750? If you're lucky, you'll get a vague and unhelpful response indicating potential people groups that he may have been a part of. If you're a little unlucky, it'll give you some wrong information from somewhere on the internet that you can probably go track down on your own and determine is inaccurate. If you're very unlucky, it will have a hallucination and give you a wild cockamamie story full of amazing details that will leave you frantically scouring the internet for days, looking for information that simply doesn't exist. These LLMs are not good researchers, but they can be useful research assistants. The number one thing that I use AI tools like ChatGPT for when I'm doing genealogy is research planning. If you've never done research planning before, go back and listen to episode 5. And no, research planning isn't hard, and I certainly don't need artificial intelligence to do it for me, but boy does it help me get it done a lot faster. And I feel like it gives me just enough good ideas to really get my own thought processes churning and developing even more. An example prompt that you might give it is, build a genealogy research plan for the following research question. Who were the parents of Esther Snyder, born 1830 in New York and died in 1912 in Nebraska, wife of Matthew Rausch and mother of Mary Rausch? So ChatGPT doesn't know who Esther Snyder was, and if you asked specifically about her, you might get something about the migration pattern of Germans to Nebraska. Not useless, but not all that helpful either. But with the example question that I just offered up, ChatGPT gave me a detailed 10-step research plan, complete with recommended sources and repositories. It didn't just give me a list of sources, but also offered things that I should look for specifically in each source type, and it even offered alternate spellings for both Snyder and Rausch to try. It won't actually do any of that work for you, but now you've got a good evening of genealogy planned and ready, and it took you about 30 seconds to do it. Speaking of alternate spellings, that's another good use for it. For the most part, alternate spellings are relatively easy to think of yourself, but ChatGPT can offer you up a more complete list to try. When I asked specifically about Snyder, it gave me 12 variations, taking into account the types of spelling variations that both native English and native German speakers might use. I probably wouldn't try all 12, but it gave me more that I'd like to try than I would have come up with myself. When you go further and ask it to extrapolate how human and computer indexing might mistake some handwriting characters, it offers up a whole slew of additional things to try. So again, it can't do the research, but it can help give you advice for you to do the research. You can explain to it the work that you've already done on a specific research question and what results, if any, you've found, and ask it for advice on where to go next. Its ability to track context across a conversation allows you to go back and forth on specific topics and expand into areas that you think might be good ideas. It's not as good as sitting down with a professional genealogist for a consult session, but it is surprisingly good at this. You can even get it to work through with you on planning your first genealogy road trip. When I had it help me plan a trip to South Carolina, it offered up several repositories to put on the itinerary that I hadn't thought of. That got me looking into these repositories to see what kind of records they had. If you get really advanced with some of this stuff and aren't afraid of spending a little bit of money, you can graduate into something like AutoGPT, which you can use for far more complex tasks. As an example, you could ask it about planning your trip and have it not just build a generic itinerary, but also have it look at scheduling it, determining the cheapest flights, rental cars, and hotels for each of your destinations, as well as providing you with an Excel spreadsheet checklist of specific records to search in each repository. It can go even deeper, but I've only just dabbled with it. Its abilities are impressive, but it will cost you a little bit of money. It's not a subscription or a single purchase price, but rather each mission that you give it will cost a certain amount. I've never given it anything to do that cost me more than about 50 cents, though, so we're not talking about taking out a second mortgage or anything. Beyond using LLMs to assist you with the things that you do, I don't really think that there's much room for AI and genealogy right now. I know there are a lot of companies that are going to tell you the exact opposite because they want to take some of your money, and it's a dynamic world right now, so maybe my opinion will change on this in a few years or even a few months. But as things currently stand, it's just not the cure-all that some people are touting it as. I use image generation AI, but not for genealogy because accuracy is important to me. And I don't want to have it create an image of what my 4 times great-grandfather might have looked like, or I don't want to have it animate an old photo that I might have of an ancestor because it's just a fabrication. It's a dream. It's no different than if I just painted it myself. There's no actual value to it. But I know some people like to use these tools that way, and all I can say is, you do you. But please, for the love of all things holy, don't upload these things to genealogy sites like Ancestry. Some of these images can be very convincing looking, and it would break my heart if some poor genealogist came along and saw your image of an ancestor that you share, and they end up putting it in their tree and thinking it's actually a picture of that person. As a segue into concluding this episode, that does make me think of one last warning, both specific to AI and genealogy and more broadly to AI in our society. People are using AI to generate boatloads of content of just about every conceivable type. Written, images, video, audio, you name it. So examine everything that you see or hear critically. Russian troll farms are already wielding AI as a weapon used to rip apart our society. Don't let thoughtlessly generated content tear down your family tree as well. As always, other people's research and content is great to give us a direction to look, but never take anything at face value. It's unfortunate that that's where we are, but there's no denying it, so there's no point in ignoring it. Technology is often a double-edged sword, and AI is no different. It comes with some pretty significant downsides, but Pandora's box has been opened and there's no putting it back again. So we may as well learn how to use it for our benefit at the same time that we learn how to avoid its pointy fangs. So, ending it on that pleasant note, I hope you've at least gotten something out of this. If you've found an interesting way to use AI in your genealogical workflow, I'd love to hear about it at the WGT Pod on Twitter. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.